Okay, hello, and thank you for joining today's IRIS Prep Talk. These sessions are designed to introduce teacher education faculty to resources developed by the OSEP-funded national centers. Today, you'll learn about some important resources from the National Center on Educational Outcomes. I'm Sarah Simone, the IRIS Center's Technical Assistance Coordinator, and the IRIS Center's Project Director, Naomi Tyler, is also with us today. We will be monitoring the chat in case you have any questions. Please note that this session is also being recorded for those who are unable to attend live. During the session, the presenters will share one resource at a time, followed by a brief question and answer after each resource. If you have questions for the presenters, please drop them in the chat or send a direct message to Naomi or myself. At 1:30, we will wrap up and share some final information, and then we'll keep the Zoom open for additional 30 minutes to continue the discussion informally. And now I'm excited to introduce Cheryl Lazarus, Christy Liu, and Andrew Hinkle from the NCEO, who will be sharing resources related to assessment and instruction for students with disabilities and English learners with disabilities.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Lazarus, and I'm the director of NCEO, and I'm pleased to be here, and we're all very excited to tell you about a few NCEO resources. NCEO is the National Technical Assistance Center funded by OSEP that provides resources, technical assistance related to the assessment of students with disabilities, English learners, and English learners with disabilities and assessments. Andrew?
Hello, I'm Andrew Hinkle. I am the Educational Program Manager here at NCEO.
And I'm Christy Liu. I'm the Assistant Director at NCEO.
Okay, so I'm the first person to present, and I am going to give you an overview of our website. The address is very easy, nceo.info. If you want to go there yourself, check it out. I see they dropped a link into the chat. This QR code will also get you there if you want to check it out on your phone. I'm going to give you just a couple seconds to do that if you want, and then I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint and share the actual website here. So our website has a wealth of information. I'm basically going to share it with you like you read, top to bottom, left to right, except I'm going to jump all the way down to the bottom first and point out down here, there's this little welcome to NCEO video. If you are interested in knowing more about NCEO's work in detail, it's about a 3-minute video that you can watch on your own time, but it's kind of hidden down here. So I wanted to point that out. So jumping back up to the top, going across the top, we have a lot of information on our website here about the different types of assessments that one would find in an inclusive balanced assessment system. And this is sort of very high level overview, sort of a general introduction to each type of assessment, general assessments, alternate assessments, English language proficiency assessments, other types of assessments. And for each one of these, if you go there, we break down with a general description, and then we break down information about participation, accessibility, and accommodations, and the reporting of that particular type of assessment. So for people who don't know very much about assessments, standardized assessments, this is a good way to kind of get a quick and dirty overview. Next to that, we also go into topics that are parallel, related to the actual assessments, content standards, because assessments measure something, and usually standards. English language proficiency standards, accountability. Graduation is tied to assessment very often, and standards-based IEPs. And so again, it's kind of a high level look, but a descriptor or explanation. And for each one, we also dive into some frequently asked questions. Then this one is, I think, very helpful. We do an analysis or a roundup of state policies across all of these different topic areas. So if you are curious about a state's accessibility and accommodations policies, or your own state's accessibility and accommodation policies, you can click that as a topic and then find the state that you're interested in. I live in Columbus, Ohio, so I'm going to choose Ohio. And it'll take me to our state education department's page that includes information about accessibility for testing, for the state tests. So that is a very handy tool. And then our resources page. And our resources, you'll see we have 819 resources. NCEO has been around since 1990 and has been very prolific in those 30-something years. So it's a great way. Not everything is going to be applicable to teachers in the teacher prep program for sure. One of our primary audiences for a long time has been state education agencies. So you're going to find a lot about that, but we do have many resources that would also be relevant. The best way to do it is to figure out what your assessment topic is, and you can search by topics and bring up all of the resources on that topic. If you're looking for a particular type of resource, and we do have some resources in other languages, so that might be of interest to some people. Those tend to be resources targeted towards parents, and you can also sort by year. So tons and tons of resources in there to explore. So like we're reading top to bottom, or left to right, top to bottom. So going down the page a little bit, other than our blurb that describes our center, we always put up our most recent publications. Then here on the right, these are a bunch of resources that I think may be of help to you. Our 1% toolkit, I don't know how much you know about alternate assessments and participation in alternate assessments, but it's one of the state's hot topics right now and has been for a few years. So we put together a toolkit that has right now 12 different tools. Again, some are targeted towards state education agencies, but there are some that are for LEAs and some that go down to the teacher level. Tool number 10, for example, which is right here, is a IEP team resource, and it has over 12 other sort of tools embedded that IEP teams can review for looking at making decisions about alternate assessment participation. Very good thing. We have an accommodations toolkit, which I think I'm already hitting my time. So we did a research summary of all of the test assessment accommodations we could find, and do a sort of a meta-analysis of that research for 28 different accommodations. And for each accommodation, there's also a summary of state policies about that specific accommodation. Some APR data, I'm going to skip that one. Data analytics may also be of a lot of use to you. We take the APR data and we create these interactive tools. So if you were curious about, for example, the percentage of students with disabilities by disability categories from 2005 to 2016, 17, which is our most recent publicly available data, you can click on that. And you can easily see by state the percentage of students, the total number of students, and the percentage of students with disabilities in that state. And then there's other ways to use this tool to break that down as well. And for fear of running over my time, I'll let you explore the rest of these. There's a participation communication toolkit that has some teacher flyers in it. School leader series, which is designed for teachers and other school leaders. And this accommodation bibliography, we've been collecting research on accommodations going back to the 90s, and we put it all together in an easy searchable database. And the Special Education Director's Toolkit is also of interest, but I'm out of time. So any questions?
We had one question about which areas you might recommend for different teacher educators, but I think you addressed that as you were talking. So
Okay.
Thank you. We can go on to the next resource.
Okay, I believe that's me. Andrew, if you can get my slides up, I'm going to start talking. I'm going to share with you a specific NCEO resource that might be useful in your work with your university students. This brief, oh, no, back up. It's not me.
Okay.
Next is Cheryl.
Resource to Cheryl. Welcome back to
It's
you.
always a surprise how these things play out. I'm the next resource that I'll tell you about. I want to tell you a little bit about some online professional development modules that NCEO developed. We developed them a few years ago, but boy, they are still, in my opinion, state of the art, really useful. We worked with a Learning Technologies Center at the University of Minnesota to develop them, and we did a lot of thinking about how adults learn, how to create modules that are engaging and that people want to keep coming back to, that it's not how quickly can I get from slide 1 to slide X, but how can I go through the slides and then come back to them as a resource. To start with, first time through, the modules are locked and you can't jump ahead, but once individuals gone through them, they can come back in as many times as they would like. And there's so much here that we find that a lot of people do. These modules have been used in a number of teacher licensure courses, special education courses, assessment courses across the nation. And so, and we've had really good feedback on them. Next slide. There's 5 modules, each of which align with a piece of the accommodations decision-making process. Really starting with what are students' needs and characteristics, then how does that inform instructional decision-making, assessment decision-making, and then coming back, the yielding of valid measurement of what the students know and can do, as well as just thinking about, how can we iteratively look at things, evaluate what worked, what didn't work, and then improve accommodations decisions from year to year. Next slide. This is a case-based curriculum. It features a student named Emma, who is a middle school student. She is struggling primarily in math because she finds it difficult to interact with print. It is kind of walking through the use of the read aloud accommodation in math. Next slide. The case-based study includes a number of videos where kind of walking through these case-based videos, the teacher talking with Emma, with her mother. My favorite of all the videos is the one that's in the upper left-hand corner, and that's a special education teacher and a math teacher having a discussion about, does Emma need the read aloud accommodation in math? It starts with the math teacher kind of just rolling her eyes and ends a minute and a half or 2 minutes later with the math teacher saying, yeah, maybe Emma really does need a read aloud accommodation in math. But it really is, this video has been very widely used, viewed. It really helps that think through that conversation between between general ed, special ed teachers about accommodations. Next slide. The modules include a decision-making tool, and the tool first demonstrates how the information can be used related to the featured student, Emma, to make accommodations decisions. Next slide. This is then followed by, we included detailed student profiles. It's kind of like a, I don't know, in old-fashioned terms, a file folder with lots of information about three additional students with characteristics that vary. I believe one student is hard of hearing, another has a cognitive disability. But then it becomes your turn, the person taking the modules, their opportunity to work their way through the decision-making tool using the information in the student profiles. So next slide. Now, we have found that the whole modules are very, very useful. We've also learned over time that many of these individual videos can be very useful. The video that I was telling you about a little bit ago about the conversation between the math teacher and the special education teacher, that's been viewed over the years by over 15,000 people. And just the videos themselves, or selected ones of those videos, have also been widely used in teacher prep programs, and there's places where it's really useful to do the whole modules. There's other times when you may just find a few videos are very helpful. Are there any questions, comments?
Yes, we have two questions. The first question is, how do faculty access the modules if they're locked? And then also, do the locked modules that you showed, do those open up once the previous one has been completed?
So, right, once the previous one is completed, yes, the next one opens up. And I guess the first time a faculty member looks at the modules, you need to register. Very simple, registration process. Basically, just your name, email, address, and then you get the ability, I think you create a password, get the ability to, go into the modules. The first time a faculty member goes through the modules, they would need to take it themselves. So that's how you get it unlocked, is by doing the module. And let's see, there was another piece to that question.
No, you got both of them. I did have one other question, whether you have any tips for using this in a face-to-face or a hybrid teaching situation.
These were originally developed pre-COVID. So they were used back in the era of, face-to-face learning. I'm familiar of one university or one instructor who, when she used these modules, she assigned these modules as, something students were required to do in her course. At the end, when the modules are completed, a certificate is auto-generated. And then students needed to turn in their auto-generated certificate to her to show that that they completed the modules. So that's one way they were used. These clearly, lend themselves easily to use in an online environment or a hybrid environment.
Thank you. I think we can go ahead and move on to the next resource.
Okay, now it's my turn. Sorry, I got a little ambitious there. So I'm going to share with you an actual document, an electronic document that you can download as a PDF. And that is a brief that we co-created with the TIE Center called MTSS for All, including students with significant cognitive disabilities. You probably are familiar with this term, but MTSS is an acronym for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. And that's a whole school framework for organizing and providing a tiered continuum of instruction and positive behavior supports to support the learning of all students. Many schools and districts use an MTSS model. Sometimes they use something that is tiered but has a slightly different name. And I think some of these same recommendations still apply. it's important when thinking about a whole school model like this that all kids are included. And one of the groups we find often is not included are students with significant cognitive disabilities who might participate in an alternate assessment based on alternate achievement standards. And so this brief really addresses how a well-designed MTSS system can prevent students with significant cognitive disabilities from being placed in more restrictive educational placements. So the slide shows an image of the cover of the brief. There's a link to the website at the bottom, which is also in the materials you received for the prep talk. And then if you have your phone out, there is a QR code there as well. You could take a quick picture of it here if you wanted and take a look at it. So hang on for a second should you wish to do that. And then I'm going to share just a little bit of the content to hopefully pique your interest and help you think about how you might use it. All right, Andrew, go ahead. So there are a few misperceptions about MTSS that are raised in this brief that I think it's important for you to be aware of because it's some of the content that students would read. So I'll go through these three. The first one is that MTSS doesn't include all students with disabilities because they already receive extra support. You might hear people talk about that. And the fact is that MTSS should include all students. And I'll say a bit more about why that is not, that misperception is not accurate in a second. Go on, Andrew. The second one is that and I hear this one frequently when I'm in schools, MTSS is a process for qualifying students for special ed services. And in fact, it's a preventative model for instruction and intervention for students, not a diagnostic model. Next slide. The third myth kind of relates to an image of the three tiers of MTSS that you see on the left there. The bottom, it's like three boards stacked on each other, and the bottom biggest board is universal general instruction for all students. The middle one is targeted instruction for some students who need extra support, and the top one is intensive interventions for a smaller group of students. And the myth is that that top tier, the intensive, is special education. And in actuality, tier 3 is individual supports for any student who needs it. Special education is a supplement to every tier, and I'll have an image of this in a second. It is not that third tier. Next slide. So a few foundational assumptions that are addressed in this brief are first that students receiving special education services are general education students first. They are not special education students. They are general education students who receive special ed services. Second is that districts offer a continuum of services, emphasis on the word services, including special ed to general education students, but special education is not a placement. And third is that all students need to access and make progress in the grade level general education standards. That includes students with significant cognitive disabilities. And you as instructors might be tasked with helping your students figure out how they're going to help their students, their future students, do that. Next slide. So this image just emphasizes what I brought up a minute ago. MTSS is an additive model. If that vanilla cone is general ed instruction, then all students get that regardless of the services they receive. The chocolate ice cream might be the tier 2 interventions, and some students may have that. The strawberry might be the tier 3 interventions, and some students might have that as well, but they all get that vanilla. They all get the general ed instruction. Special ed is like the gummy bears on the far right. So if you have a fancy ice cream shop where you live and they mix in things into the ice cream, think of special ed like that. It gets mixed into the cones or the tiers. I'm going to show you an image. I hope you go to the brief and check out because it's probably too complicated to explain here. Next slide. But it's an image that gives an MTSS triangle with the tiers of support that's in the middle. On the left side, it gives ideas for how general and special educators might collaborate to talk about instruction. On the right side, it gives ideas for how they might collaborate to talk about positive behavior interventions and supports. And so I find this diagram is really useful. It's just got a lot of detail that it's hard to share in a minute or less here. So I'm going to suggest if you have an interest in this topic, you might go and look at that specific diagram in the resource. And so maybe I'll wrap up a few seconds early here because I do see there are some comments or questions. Sarah, what have we got?
So one comment that this brief, it does look very highly detailed and has lots of helpful graphics and tables for including students with significant cognitive disabilities in MTSS. I guess the question is, are there other related resources that you would recommend to provide maybe background knowledge as teacher educators dive into this one?
Yeah, so this was a joint project between the National Center on Educational Outcomes and TIES Center, which is kind of an affiliated center that deals specifically with the instruction of students with significant cognitive disabilities. So NCEO would have some resources on alternate assessments these students would participate in. But for more about the instruction, I would recommend that you check out TIES Center, and it's tiescenter.org. And really dig into some of the instructional practices. And if you have an interest in, contacting me to ask about specific resources, shoot me an email and I can help you find those.
Great, thank you. One other question for you. So are there any states, districts, or schools putting this into practice? And if so, how can we connect with them to learn more to help inform our preparation programs?
Oh, that is a really good question. I am not one of the original authors of this brief, but I am aware that TIES Center that I just referenced a second ago is about to publish a case study of schools implementing MTSS. So you might watch the TIES Center website for that. Cheryl, would you happen to have any thoughts on specific states or school districts implementing this? Cheryl has a recent grant project that is related somewhat to this topic.
I guess I cannot name names. I know there has been widespread interest in this, and Christy is referring to a recent grant that we got with, it's a competitive grants for state assessments grant that the state of Arkansas got, and we are working with them. The focus of that grant will be instruction for those students on the cusp, right on the border between the alternate assessment and the general assessment. That group, as IEP teams are doing a better job of identifying which students are in the alternate. Some students have in recent years moved from the alternate assessment to the general assessment. And then at NCEO, we've been getting another set of questions. And those questions are, okay, we agree that child probably doesn't belong in the alternate assessment, but sometimes our teachers don't know how to instruct the kid when they've moved to the general assessment. So we've gotten a lot more questions about instruction of students on the cusp. Multi-tiered systems of supports that are inclusive of all students can be very, very useful there, and states are, really looking into, and some states already using the system for all students, including those on the cusp.
Great, thank you. So it's about almost 1:29. So I'm going to go ahead and just to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm going to share a few brief remarks, and then we'll keep the Zoom open for another 30 minutes to continue this conversation informally. So in the chat, we're uploading a handout with links to the NCEO resources that were discussed today, and also links to related IRIS modules. We hope that you'll use all these resources in your courses and reach out to NCEO or us here at the IRIS Center if you'd like to learn more. We're also going to provide a link to all of the OSEP funded national centers if you'd like to explore those more. And next month, we'll be highlighting another one of them on February the 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll be highlighting the resources from CIDL, the Center for Innovation, Design, and Digital Learning. And the last thing we're going to put in the chat for you here at this point is a feedback survey for today's prep talk. If you could provide us with your feedback. We'd appreciate it. It will help us measure the impact of the prep talks and help us plan for future sessions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, and we will invite you to stick around and have more informal discussion with the NCEO people.